I never expected that a quiet afternoon by the pool would lead to a moment that changed the way I saw myself, my life, and a stranger who walked into it without warning. But when the gardener arrived, sun-worn, gentle-spoken, and carrying more than just tools, my peaceful day slipped into something far more complicated and far more meaningful. Don't forget subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write in the comments which city you are listening from. This is very important for us. And now, enjoy listening. I was stretched out on the poolside lounger when it happened, half asleep under the mild California sun, the kind that warms you without making you feel guilty for relaxing too long. My name is Melissa, 22 years old, though some days I feel like life has already worn grooves in me deeper than my age should allow. I'd taken the afternoon off. No deadlines, no phone calls, no expectations. Just me, a glass of iced tea sweating on the table beside me, and the sound of the pool filter humming somewhere under the stone deck. I heard the gate click first, that metallic sound that always travels farther than you expect. I sat up a little, brushing hair from my eyes, and that's when I saw him, Jacob. He stepped inside with the easy confidence of someone who's worked outdoors long enough to understand both plants and people. He looked around briefly, scanning the yard in that focused, purposeful way professionals do, before his gaze finally met mine. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't electric, but there was something subtle, like when you open a window and realize the air feels different. "Oh, sorry," he said, immediately pulling off his cap. "Didn't mean to startle you. I'm here to take care of the yard. Shouldn't take long." His voice was low, warm, and steady. A practical voice, a soothing one. "You didn't startle me," I replied, though my pulse told another story. "I forgot you were coming today." He nodded and gave a small smile, the kind that rests more in the eyes than the mouth, then moved toward the tool shed. I watched him with a casual curiosity at first, just a young woman observing a man going about his job, but something about him held my attention longer than I expected. The way he moved seemed thoughtful, like he wasn't just hacking away at overgrown branches, but genuinely measuring the space, respecting it. The tools clinked lightly as he set them down. He adjusted the gloves on his hands, then glanced back at me. "If I'm in your way, I can start on the far side." "You're fine. Really." I lifted my iced tea without thinking and took a sip, feeling oddly conscious of my own movements. He started by trimming the hedges, and although the sound of the electric trimmer broke the quiet rhythm of the afternoon, it didn't bother me. If anything, it pulled me into the moment. Each cut looked precise, careful. The man worked like he understood that plants were alive, not just decorative. I admired that more than I expected to. I tried to go back to relaxing, but every so often I found myself watching him again. Not in an inappropriate way, just observing, noticing. The way sunlight caught the fine dust on his shirt, the steadiness in his arms, the focus in his expression. After a few minutes, he powered off the trimmer and turned toward me again. "Mind if I refill my water?" he asked, gesturing toward the outdoor sink. "Go ahead," I said, shifting my legs over the side of the lounger. "It's hot today." He walked over, and for the first time he stood close enough that I could see the details, the flecks of green in his brown eyes, the faint sunburn on his forearms, the way he carried himself with a quiet respectfulness. Not shy, not forward, just grounded. "Do you work around here often?" I asked, trying to make conversation without sounding like I was prying. "Pretty often," he said, filling his bottle. "Most people don't stay outside to watch the yard work get done, though." I laughed softly. "I'm not supervising, I promise. I just needed a calm day." He nodded like he understood more than I'd said. "We all need one of those." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The breeze rustled the trees. A leaf drifted lazily across the pool's surface. Something about the silence felt natural, not awkward, like we were two people sharing the same air without forcing anything. "Well," he finally said, tightening the cap on his bottle, "I'll finish up so you can get back to relaxing." "You're not bothering me," I replied, surprising even myself with how soft my voice sounded. He paused, meeting my eyes again, really meeting them this time. "Good to know." And then he went back to work. But something had changed. Not in the yard, not in the day. In me. I couldn't explain it yet, but it felt like someone had gently brushed the dust off a part of my mind I hadn't touched in a while. I lay back again, listening to the steady rhythm of his tools, feeling the air shift around us in ways I didn't quite understand, but welcomed all the same. It was just an ordinary afternoon. And yet, not ordinary at all. When I finally closed my eyes, I realized something unexpected. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The next afternoon felt strangely different even before anything happened, as if the air held a quiet echo from the day before. I woke with Jacob's brief smile replaying in my mind, not in a romantic way, at least not one I would admit out loud, but in the way you remember a moment that felt unexpectedly genuine. It had been a long time since someone had looked at me with such simple, unforced attention. No expectations. No pressure. Just presence. By early afternoon, the sun had settled into that warm, golden tone that always made the backyard feel like a private retreat. I stepped outside with a book in hand, not because I planned to read much, but because holding a book made me feel like I had an excuse to be out there again. The pool shimmered the way it always did, but even the water seemed to hold a quiet hum of anticipation. I had barely settled into the lounger when I heard the gate click again. There he was. Jacob walked in with the same steady stride, a small coil of hose over one shoulder and a toolbox in hand. He looked slightly surprised to see me, almost as if he wasn't expecting me to be there 2 days in a row, but his expression softened quickly. "Afternoon," he said. "Didn't think I'd interrupt you again." "You're not interrupting," I replied, and I meant it. "I figured you might come back. The hedges look great, by the way." He lowered the hose and gave a modest nod. "Thanks. I have to finish clearing out the debris from the back corner. Shouldn't be too messy." "You always say that," I teased lightly. He paused mid-motion, looked over at me, and smiled just enough to show he appreciated the joke. Fair point. I had opened my book but mostly watched him over the top of the pages. He moved through the yard with the same patience as before, but today there was something more relaxed in the way he glanced in my direction every so often. Not curious, not searching, just acknowledging that I was there, that we shared the space. He carried a bundle of palm fronds toward the bin, and as he passed, he said, "You find any peace today?" I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. "Peace? Yesterday you said you needed a calm day. I just wondered if today's giving you more of the same." I closed the book in my lap. "I'm trying. Some days it's easier than others." He wiped his hands on his gloves. "Yeah, I get that." It wasn't the words that struck me. It was how he said them. Softly, like someone who wasn't offering advice or solutions, only understanding. He continued working, but the conversation lingered in the air between us, shaping the afternoon into something more connected than casual small talk. A breeze drifted through the trees, carrying the smell of cut grass and warm earth. He kneeled by the flower bed near the fence, and for a while, all I heard was the gentle rustle of leaves and the scrape of tools on soil. At one point, he stood and stretched his back with a quiet groan. I sat up. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said with a laugh under his breath. "Just a long week. Back reminds me I'm not 20 anymore." "You look young enough," I said before thinking, then quickly added, "I mean, you move like you know what you're doing." He tilted his head, amused. "I'll take that." I felt heat rush to my cheeks, but instead of avoiding the moment, I let it linger. We were two people sharing a simple exchange, nothing more, but it felt honest in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. He approached the outdoor sink again, rinsing dirt from his hands. "Mind if I ask something?" he said without looking over. "Go ahead." "How come you spend so much time out here alone?" The question wasn't intrusive. It felt like he was trying to understand me, not pry. "I guess being out here makes me feel like I can breathe easier," I said. "Life's been a lot lately. Too loud sometimes." He nodded slowly. "Nature helps with that. Gives you a place to think." "Or avoid thinking," I said with a small laugh. He looked at me, then really looked. Sometimes avoiding thinking is the first step to figuring things out. I hadn't expected such a thoughtful answer from the gardener, who had barely spoken more than a few words the day before. But there it was, a depth I hadn't seen yet, something steady and grounded. He finished rinsing his hands, wiped them dry, and took a few steps closer, not close enough to invade my space, but near enough that I felt the quiet awareness between us shift again. "If you ever need someone to talk to," he said gently, "I'm here every other day. Lot of thinking time built into this kind of work." I smiled. "That's kind of you." "It's not kindness," he said thoughtfully. "Just, I know what it feels like to carry too much alone." For some reason, those words settled deeply in me. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I let the warmth of the sun, the scent of fresh-cut leaves, and the calming presence of the man standing a few feet away wrap around the moment. He stepped back to return to his tools. "Anyway," he said, almost shyly, "I should get this done." "Take your time," I said softly. "I don't mind you being here." He looked over his shoulder, offered another small smile, and something unspoken passed between us, something quiet, respectful, and stirring in ways I didn't yet have the courage to name. And just like that, the afternoon continued, but nothing inside me was the same. The next time Jacob arrived, I wasn't pretending to read or pretending to relax. I was simply waiting, though I told myself it was just to enjoy another peaceful afternoon. The truth was more tangled. The space between us had grown warmer, softer, almost expectant, and I found myself wondering what he thought when he left the yard each time, wondering if he thought about me at all. The gate clicked again, the familiar metallic note echoing across the pool. I looked up instantly, trying not to look like I'd been listening for it all morning. Jacob stepped inside with a rake in one hand and a coil of twine in the other. He wore a simple gray shirt today, sleeves pushed to his elbows, the sun already warming his skin. When he spotted me, something about his expression shifted, just a slight softening around the eyes, like he was relieved I was there. "Afternoon, Melissa," he said, sounding more comfortable with my name than he had before. "Hi, Jacob. Looks like you've got a full load today." He glanced at the scattered leaves along the back fence. "The wind last night did half my job for me," he said with a small smile. "Just not the half I wanted." I laughed, and he walked farther into the yard, dropping his tools by the citrus trees. For a moment, I watched him tie back the lower branches, his hands steady and practiced. There was something strangely soothing about it, watching someone who knew their craft work with such quiet intention. After a few minutes, he looked at me over his shoulder. "You're out early today." "I couldn't sleep," I admitted. "Too many thoughts." "Good ones or heavy ones?" he asked gently. "A mix, I guess." He nodded, as though he understood the weight of both. Sometimes the mind keeps you up because it wants you to listen. That sounds like something a therapist would say. He chuckled softly. "Maybe, but I've had enough long days out here to learn a thing or two." I hesitated before speaking again. "Do you ever feel like you're standing still while the rest of the world keeps moving?" He paused in his work, leaning lightly on the handle of the rake. "More times than I can count." I didn't know why, but hearing him admit that steadied something in me. It made me feel less strange, less adrift. I sat up straighter, resting my hands on my knees. "What do you do when that happens?" I asked. Jacob walked closer, not too close, just enough that I didn't have to raise my voice. I look for small things to anchor to. Routines. Moments. People who remind me where I am. I swallowed, feeling the subtle weight of that final word. "Does it help?" I asked quietly. "More than I expected," he replied. He returned to his work, but now the silence between us felt charged, full of something tender and cautious. I watched him wrap twine around the branches, then step back to assess his work, hands on his hips. Every so often he stole a glance at me, and every time our eyes met, there was that same spark of quiet recognition. When he finished with the trees, he went to the sink to rinse his hands, and I stood, reflecting on the strange courage rising in my chest. "Jacob," I said softly. He looked at me, waiting. "Why do you talk to me the way you do?" The question came out gentler than I intended, almost uncertain. He dried his hands slowly. "Because you listen," he said simply. There was no hesitation in his voice, no overthinking, just honesty, plain and steady. "You'd be surprised how many people don't," he added. I took a step toward him without realizing it, drawn by the warmth in his tone. "I like the way you talk," I said quietly. "It feels different." He studied me for a moment, not with intensity, but with a careful sincerity that made my breath catch. "I don't talk to everyone like this," he admitted, "but with you, it feels natural." Something inside me softened, opened, warmed. I didn't blush. I felt too grounded for that, but I became aware of the air between us, gentle and full, almost like it was holding its breath. He reached for his rake again, then hesitated. "Melissa," he said, his voice lower, "if I ever cross a line or make you uncomfortable, just tell me. I'd never want to do that." "You haven't," I said quickly. "Not even close." "Good," he murmured, and the quiet relief in his voice tugged at something deep in me. He returned to the trees, but now his movements were slower, more thoughtful. I watched the muscles in his arms flex as he gathered fallen branches, watched the way the sunlight played off the curve of his shoulders. But it wasn't attraction alone that held me. It was the feeling of being seen, gently, respectfully, without expectation. When he finished, he walked toward me with a small paper bag. "These fell from the tree earlier," he said. "Thought you might like them. They're sweet this time of year." I opened the bag and found 3 bright tangerines inside. The simple kindness of the gesture struck me harder than I expected. "Thank you," I said softly, my fingers brushing his as I took the bag. He didn't pull back immediately. Not forward, not lingering, just present. A moment suspended between 2 breaths. Then he stepped away, giving me space, giving us both breathing room. "I'll be back in 2 days," he said, "if the wind doesn't undo everything I just fixed." I smiled. "I'll be here." His eyes softened. "I'm glad." He gathered his tools, opened the gate, and paused before leaving, as though he wanted to say more, but chose instead to let the moment stand on its own. And as the gate clicked shut, I realized something startling. I wasn't waiting for peace anymore. I was waiting for him. The morning of the 4th visit arrived with a kind of quiet certainty, as if the world itself already knew something meaningful would happen. I woke up earlier than usual, not because of nerves, but because of a soft curiosity that tugged at me, steady and calm. The past few days had left me with a sense of warmth I hadn't felt in years, unexpected, unforced, and surprisingly grounding. By midday the sky was clear, a bright stretch of California blue, and the air held that gentle warmth that made everything feel slow and deliberate. I stepped outside with a plate of sliced fruit, telling myself it was just to enjoy the weather, not because I wanted to share it with anyone. But the truth settled quietly in my chest. I hoped Jacob would want some. The gate clicked at exactly the moment I expected it to. I didn't jump this time, didn't pretend to be lost in thought. I simply looked up and met his eyes. Jacob stepped inside carrying a small bag of tools, but today his expression held something different, like he'd walked here thinking about what he wanted to say, and still wasn't sure if he would. "Afternoon," he said gently. "Hi, Jacob." I smiled. "You're right on time." He set his tools down by the pergola. "Didn't want to miss my chance to finish up the pruning." "That's not the only reason you're here," I said softly before I could stop myself. He paused. The breeze rustled the leaves above us, but he didn't speak right away. Over the past few days, I'd grown familiar with his thoughtful silences, pauses where he wasn't avoiding an answer, just choosing the right one. "You're right," he said finally. "It isn't." He walked toward the sink to wash his hands even though they weren't dirty yet, as if the simple task gave him time to gather himself. I took the plate of fruit and stepped closer, my feet moving before my mind caught up. "I brought something," I said. He looked at the fruit, then at me. "For me?" "Only if you want some." A small, warm smile formed on his face. "I'd like that." We sat at the small table under the shade, the pool shimmering quietly beside us. He picked up a slice of mango, taking a moment to taste it, then nodded approvingly. "This is good," he said. "Better than anything I buy at the store." I laughed softly. "I figured you deserved something fresh after working so hard out here." His eyes softened. "You notice more than people think you do." "That's not always a good thing," I said, gazing at the water. "It is when it comes from a good heart." The words landed gently, settling somewhere inside me where sincerity had been missing for far too long. I took a breath, not to steady myself, but to let the moment settle. "Jacob," I said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Anything." "When you talk to me, when we spend these afternoons out here, does it mean something to you? Or am I just imagining it?" He sat back, exhaling slowly, not out of discomfort, but out of honesty preparing to surface. "You're not imagining anything," he said. "I look forward to seeing you. More than I probably should admit." A warmth spread through my chest, gentle and real. Not the flutter of infatuation, not the rush of fantasy, just a deep feeling of connection. Steady, safe. "I feel it too," I said. He reached across the table slowly, giving me enough time to pull back if I wanted to. I didn't. His hand rested lightly over mine, warm and steady, no pressure, no urgency, just presence. "I don't want to complicate your life," he said quietly. "I just like being around you. I like the way you listen, the way you look at the world, the way you make this place feel more alive." My throat tightened slightly, not with sadness, but with a strange, bright recognition, something inside me being named after a long silence. "You make it feel alive for me, too," I whispered. We sat there for a long moment, the breeze brushing our skin, the scent of citrus drifting through the yard. He didn't hold my hand tightly. He didn't pull me closer. He didn't need to. The simplicity of his touch spoke louder than any dramatic gesture could have. Eventually he released my hand, not because the moment was over, but because he respected the shape of it. "I should finish the pruning," he said gently. "Go ahead," I replied. "I'll be right here." And I was. I watched him move through the yard with the same careful focus, but today he glanced back at me more often, and every time he did, it felt like a quiet promise, one built on mutual respect, on understanding, on something that didn't need to rush to be real. When he finished and gathered his tools, he walked back to me, pausing at the gate. The late afternoon light cast a soft glow on him, and I realized how much peace he brought into my life in such a short time. "I'll be back in a few days," he said, voice warm. "If you'll be here." "I will," I said without hesitation. He smiled, not the polite kind, but one touched with meaning. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." The gate clicked closed behind him, but the quiet space he'd filled didn't empty. It stayed with me, steady, warm, and full of new understanding. As I sat by the pool, the last of the sunlight dancing on the water, I realized something quietly profound. Sometimes the most unexpected moments don't shake your world, they steady it. Sometimes a stranger doesn't enter your life to sweep you away, but to help you find your footing. Sometimes connection isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's simple and beautifully real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing exactly where I needed to be.